Now, the introduction of the videotape, Apple was founded and Chairman Mao died. These are all events, of course, from the 1970s. And the last time the US was the world's #1 oil producer. But a new report says that that's about to happen again, and as early as next year. Well, in another sign of how much the world energy market is changing, there's also more wind power than ever. Well, let's look at some numbers. The US is now pumping at 10 million barrels per day. That's for the first time since 1970, and the same amount as Saudi Arabia. Well, that is just short of Russia on 11 million. And the International Energy Agency says that the US could overtake it next year. But at the same time, though, more energy is coming from renewables. A lot of it is wind. There's been a 20% rise in the number of new wind turbines in Europe, setting records in the UK, France and Germany, which means wind is now the second largest source of electricity for Europe, behind only gas. Well, with me now is the oil and gas energy analyst Cornelia Meyer, and also the CEO of Wind Europe, Giles Dixon. Welcome to both of you. Cornelia, if I can ask you, first of all, if the United States does overtake Russia in terms of oil production, it's a big geopolitical deal, isn't it?
It's a big geopolitical deal, but they're already sort of up there. And let's not forget, it will still be Russia and Saudi Arabia, who are sort of the two biggies, who, with colluding with each other in the OPEC, non-OPEC deal, having taken out production, have a big impact on the oil market. What it does, though, the bigger production of the United States, it certainly changes the trade pattern. You've seen that the US is now allowed to export oil, which they weren't for a very long time. And so we've seen the first cargo shipment come to the UAE at the end of last year. So expect the trade patterns to change. Expect shale oil to really bring on more oil. But then we also have to see, how long will that last? You know, the energy consultancy Woodmac says shale oil is supposed to grow until 2024 and thereafter decline quite rapidly. So we have to see how long this big, new, brave new world of American dominance is.
If we are looking at sort of increased efficiency, and the crash in the oil price, in fact, made a lot of oil producers a lot more efficient, didn't it? But are the days of $147 a barrel, are they behind us? Are they no more?
I think they're really gone. What I can foresee, though, is that by about 2020, because when the oil price was very, very low, you had literally billions and billions of scheduled investment by big oil companies cancelled, and that will work its way into the supply. And those are the conventional oil, so that's a lead time for anywhere between 4 and 10 years. So by about 2020, we may see real constraints in what conventional oil production is.
Giles, let me bring you in here, because at the same time as we've got this going on with oil and oil production, we've got countries, surprising to me, led by China, including the UK is up there as well, on course to reach parity with fossil fuels through wind energy. That's a surprising fact, isn't it?
Well, if you want to build new power plant, new power generation capacity, onshore wind is the cheapest way of doing it today. The costs have fallen rapidly, especially in the last 5 years. The prices of wind power have halved in the last 5 years alone. Let me just clarify what you said at the beginning. Wind is now #2 in Europe in terms of the volume of power generation capacity, but we're still only #4 in terms of the output.
But the point that I was trying to make there about this parity is that we often talk about the energy market in terms of fossil fuels or renewables.
Yeah.
But what it's suggesting is that they're both sitting side by side in popularity. And if you've got China, which is the world's biggest consumer of fossil fuels, also leading the way with renewables, it's interesting.
Yeah, you need to remember, wind is for electricity.
Exactly.
And electricity is only just over 1/5 of total energy consumption. All the rest of it comes from transport and heating, which are powered mostly by fossil fuels.
One of the problems, though, for wind energy is that government policy can be very ambivalent about it. That must be something that you're up against.
Well, the European Union has clear targets for renewables for 2020. It's in the process of defining its target for renewables for 2030. All governments in Europe have policies for renewables, and there is a structure which has driven the expansion of wind energy in recent years. But the key factor has been the reduction in costs.
As that technology improves, and Cornelia, come in here, renewable energies are becoming cheaper, more abundant. That also has big geopolitical implications, doesn't it? Because countries with sun and wind capabilities are going to be the economic winners and no longer just the countries with oil.
Yes, but as was said before, it's really... Renewables are at this point mainly for electricity, so maybe also for electric vehicles, EVs. But most of transport, like freight transport, air transport, is all still, is still fueled by oil, is still fueled by fossil fuels. So that's one thing. And yes, other countries with lots of wind, lots of sun, obviously for their electricity needs will be in a good position. And you see that especially in the Middle East, you see that the UAE, Kuwait, and especially Saudi Arabia have great ambitious plans for renewable energy. The Saudi Vision 2030, which is sort of rejigging the Saudi economy for the 21st century, actually has a huge push towards renewables.
What do you, Giles, I'm curious to know what you think of President Trump's policies in terms of encouraging the move towards renewables?
Well, the United States is still building a lot of new wind farms, 7 gigawatts in total last year. We foresee significant further growth over the years ahead. What is happening in the US is that at state level, there continues to be very strong support for investing in wind and in solar,
but
both in Republican and Democrat states.
And what would you say to that?
I would say absolutely, because when you look at it, when you saw the Bonn Climate Summit in November, you saw that the former mayor of New York and the governor of California sort of came out as the alternate US government, really pushing renewables. And the one thing I would say is, obviously, on the tax side, it's at this point not more advantageous for coal and fossil fuels, but that's where actually the US puts itself in a disadvantage, because there's so much research being done, and the Chinese, the Europeans, they're powering ahead.
Mm-hmm. What is very interesting is how far oil and gas companies are investing in wind and other renewables now. So Shell are building a very large offshore wind farm off the coast of the Netherlands. Statoil, the Norwegian oil company, have just opened the world's first floating offshore wind farm off the coast of Scotland. BP and Total have both said very clearly they want to invest more in renewables.
And I think it's also, especially offshore wind, is for big oil-producing companies a great thing, because they already have the platforms, so they can rededicate the platforms that they would need to decommission.
Cornelia Meyer and Giles Dixon from Wind Europe, thank you very much. Very good to talk to you.